What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
Back in the 1990s, Tracey Helton Mitchell was a fan of heroin. She was even featured in an HBO documentary that became a sort of cult favorite about life in San Francisco as somebody who was addicted to heroin. Through the book and her work and speaking gigs and on social media, she is one of the people who is keeping the harm reduction flame alive in the public consciousness as the war on drug users ramps up. In the war on drug users, the implicit assumption is that abstinence, prohibition is what we need in this, the most drug consuming country in the world. And right now it feels like a lot of the quote unquote poverty porn influencers who preach abstinence and who film people who are living on the streets going through withdrawals during psychiatric emergencies and then post it to the internet to do a sort of public shaming. Those are the loudest voices around drugs in the public sphere. You have politicians, you have the real estate industry, you have corporate media instrumentalizing the Tenderloin and San Francisco as an example of what happens when you let harm reductionists run amok. Meanwhile, as I record this, of course, figures in politics, real estate, and media are consuming copious amounts of drugs on the playa at Burning Man. As someone who's an addict, I appreciate people like Tracey for hammering home the fact that prison isn't the best answer to the problem of people having addictions, and just continuing to point out the ludicrousness of the war on drug users. I'm grateful to everyone who is currently supporting the podcast at patreon.com/sadfrancisco. Right now, 73 friends are currently supporting the podcast. Thank you, Anna, for being number 73. Please consider joining Anna and everyone else. Again, it's patreon.com/sadfrancisco. I'd love to double that number by the end of the year to keep this podcast coming out regularly, to pay myself a little bit, pay the person who edits the podcast, Tyger. And you might actually be watching this on YouTube, but if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, it's Sad Francisco Podcast as the username. If you're someone who prefers to watch podcasts, most of the episodes are watchable there. Tracey, thank you so much for doing this. I know that we met on TikTok initially. And so the first question that I have for you, as a fellow addict, do you consider social media to be addictive?
So I thought about, actually, this is the question I had to think about the most, because I think there are elements of social media that really can pull a person in. But I think initially what has happened with pretty much every app that has been rolled out is there was this opportunity for social connection. I mean, even with Facebook. So Facebook initially was a rating people app, but then when you when you think of like the early days of Twitter, where it was a place where you would really get real time information, or like TikTok that really assisted people in opening up their worldview because you had people from other countries who were providing sort of like unfiltered and very loosely moderated information in the early stages. Uh, and even when you think about Instagram, before Instagram was what it is now, it was just a picture app where you could see, different people doing their different things. There was an opportunity for it to be something that it's not. But then what quickly happens is capitalism steps in, and it says, well, how can we take this and squeeze whatever value is here and change it into something different that can be monetized. And that's really where, in the attention economy, they make it so the videos pull you in even more, and they have ways that they fix the algorithm to keep you on. So you're just scrolling. But like what I was thinking about last night was like in the early days of Instagram, there used to be a hashtag, like hashtags that were specific to like, one was the junkies of Instagram, and it was like a support group that people used to have on Instagram, to the point that I think it was covered in Motherboard. It was covered in some, tech focused uh, publication. And then what happened is they got rid of it. They banned all the, once they became aware of those kind of
Mm,
like hashtags, they came in and they banned all of that. Like, and once Elon came in and saw what Twitter had the capabilities of doing, he wanted to take that and do something different with it. And I
yeah,
think we haven't really seen, and even me running a naloxone program through social media, through Reddit, if you include Reddit to be social media, like
sure.
there were so many opportunities there, but because it's so intrinsically tied with capitalism, whatever the potential is, it then becomes bastardized into something that can become very unhealthy. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely have sat there till my back hurt and my eyes hurt and my fingers hurt scrolling social media, because I've just been so wrapped up in like other people's nonsense.
For sure. Same, same. Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of like looking for another place to land after TikTok, which is, I mean, a platform that you have like tens of thousands of followers. I don't have quite that many, but it's been good for like a while, for like the past year or so, that I've really been like doing it more consistently. But it's oof, the
Yeah,
censorship
it's, I
is
mean,
like,
I'm already trying to migrate to YouTube or another app, but I mean,
yeah,
YouTube is just another, extension of capitalism, but uh they're really, and the thing about Blue Sky is it's such an echo chamber, and so it's really
yeah,
not gotten, you know, a foothold to where there's enough robust conversation that's available on it to a certain
yeah,
degree to
yeah,
stimulate
yeah,
conversation. But I wish there was something like that. But I mean, with the new TikTok in particular is going to, it's, they're already suppressing content. They already, the
yeah,
move to the right has already started to happen. And I've enjoyed TikTok in a lot of ways, just because of it's, there's everything from like looking at cute animals to like step by step instructions on how to make bread or whatever it is. There's, very short form content, but um people have realized the value of that, and the value of people organizing, so they're going to get rid of it. They're it won't be the same. They're going to have to change it. Too many people are organizing and finding ways to organize through TikTok, and they don't. That's something they're not going to allow.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Totally with you on that. Um, and I mean, it's been good while it lasted, I suppose. Waiting for another like round of like wistful goodbyes
Yeah,
in September, like we saw in January, with like the initial potential ban that was then extended and then extended again. But in any case, all right, so maybe social media has some like addictive elements. Any other favorite coping mechanisms lately for you?
so I read a book maybe every 2 or 3 days, but I don't read. Um, I read just like fantasy books or whatever. I also volunteer at a wildlife rescue. It was interesting because when I started at the wildlife rescue, I ran into someone else I knew vaguely from like health work there, and we both looked at each other like, "Oh, you're here. I see you here." You know what I mean? Because we
Mm,
are so burnt out on so many ways, and it was like it's almost life affirming to see, because the animals, they get to leave. They get, so many of them get um helped back to, health. They get helped back to health, and then they get to go out, and so that was something. I do a lot of like going out in nature. um that's something that has really helped me. uh I think just even pursuing any kind of hobbies, though, in the current environment, like there's so much. I mean, I also now I only watch limited amounts of news in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night because I was watching and consuming so much content about the news, it almost
Yeah,
paralyzed me. And especially, I have a diagnosed mental illness. It was just too much all at one time. And I said, I can either try to do things to change the world, or I can sit and watch about the state of the world to the point that I'm paralyzed because
yeah,
we're overloaded with so much information, so much stuff all at one time. It's very, very uh it's very difficult. But I think um and also trying to have time to just think, like use my just like not have any kind of electric noise going on at the same time. But right
for
now my
sure.
cats are playing under the door, so that's also entertaining. It's endlessly entertaining to watch them. I'm very heavily leaning on their emotional support right now. If they only knew.
Right on, right on. Yeah, no, it's like compartmentalizing and like just having some set time when you're consuming the news, which inevitably there's going to be a lot of depressing stuff. It's yeah, if you are able to compartmentalize in that way, I feel like yeah, that is an excellent way to try to cope. Uh, your book, The Big Fix, is a story of like you're dealing with addiction and then also the concept of harm reduction, which San Francisco is kind of famous for originating a lot of the things that the world has come to like know as methods of harm reduction. But wondering if you could talk a little bit about when you first like were aware of the concept of harm reduction.
So to sort of set the scene of um so I'm from rural Ohio originally, and when I first started using substances I was living in Cincinnati, Ohio. And during that period of time, um I'm not even sure Reagan had allowed them to say the word AIDS if it had been said out loud. But
Mm-hmm.
people who used substances, particularly the substances that I started using, um, were very much at risk of contracting HIV. And also, I had, gay friends, trans friends, there very much had been this concentrated effort to not get information out into the community. So the first year that I was using intravenously, which was before I came to San Francisco, I had the same syringe for an entire year. So um, myself and my friends, we would bleach. You would bleach the same syringe over and over again,
Sure.
and you would hope that it did not break off in your arm. Because you didn't have. There was. Diabetics would have syringes, but like there really was not an opportunity to get new syringes. So then in 1992, when I came to San Francisco, and I, very much got involved with very heavy substance use, people were saying, you should go to the syringe exchange. And I was like, what do you mean
Mm,
syringe exchange? Syringe exchange? Because you would have your personal syringes. You would be sharpening them on a matchbook like William S. Burroughs style. And I got to meet, especially with being involved, with being a lady of the evening, and like, different trans works, sex workers that I knew and stuff like that. They were like, oh, you can go get condoms and you can go get syringes. And they would do, and so there would be this huge line at the Civic Center in front of City Hall, where people were waiting to exchange syringes. So at that time, um, I started meeting my first friends who at that time contracted HIV. And they would tell them at the time, you basically have 2 years to live. You're going to go home and and probably die, and get your affairs in order. And then at the same time in 1992, I moved into the Ambassador Hotel, which was a makeshift AIDS hospice that was run, and the front desk person was Hank Wilson, who ended up opening Tenderloin AIDS Resource Center.
Hmm. Yeah.
So those folks that worked in that hotel, they were very much focused on what would come to be known as harm reduction. Tom Calvanese and Hank and the public health workers that would come into the hotel, like they were very concerned, and they would educate, and they would have like education sessions on like not sharing needles, on using condoms, and all these different kinds of things. And that was juxtaposed against, you would see people, you'd walk through the hallways and people would be in their hospital beds dying from AIDS, and most of the people who lived in the building when I lived there were dying from AIDS, because it wasn't HIV. There was no, I think they called it ARC before it was even HIV back then.
Hmm.
So there was a person who lived in the building, and his name was Raven. And so he would collect syringes from the different residents that lived there, many of whom could not really get out, but still, chose to use substances, because if you know you're going to die, why not? You know what I mean? If there's no, why not? It makes perfect sense. And he would collect these syringes and he would bring them back for the residents. And that's what I ended up doing for a while before I even had heard the term harm reduction. And then I also, in my purse, I would carry syringes and condoms, because having condoms at that time was a furtherance of evidence for prosecution for cases, particularly um, felony. If you knew that, if the person was diagnosed with having HIV and they had condoms with them and they were still engaging in sex work, they could potentially be prosecuted for a felony. So I would
Right.
carry around condoms for a lot of people.
Famously, yeah, Kamala Harris, that was like one of the things that she, as a DA, was tried to prosecute some of those cases.
So that was my introduction to harm reduction before I even knew what it was called. And it was a lot of ways, it was just mutual aid. But then the health department was involved in some of it, but there was a lot of people that were working to make sure that the community was healthier. So
Yeah.
I didn't hear the term harm reduction until after I got sober. Um, when I started working on what was called the heroin committee, then out of that came the dope project, where before there was the lock zone, we were teaching people rescue breathing. And so that was a way to prevent overdoses, because they had what they called an epidemic of overdoses, which was, in hindsight, it's less than 200 overdoses. It's mind-boggling how fentanyl changed that whole
Yeah.
landscape. But at the time, um, I still, next to my bed, I have an article about that period of time, because they had listed people, like stories of people who had died in the paper, and one of them was like my ex-girlfriend, who was, they had like told her story of how she'd overdosed and died. And it changed me to where I wanted to do something, not just be in grief, not just be sad all the time, because my best friend died of AIDS. Another really close friend of mine died of AIDS, and my friends were, you know, contracting hepatitis C. Like, I've seen friends die from hepatitis C. Now there's, they have medications that have a fairly good, really good actually, um, cure rate. But there were so many things that were going on during that period of time where I thought, if I can contribute in some way, uh, I would. So that's sort of like, and also, being very active, who I wanted to really acknowledge, like, the people who really helped me back then, who told me, like, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that, were really the trans sex workers of the Tenderloin district, who sat me down as a young person, because I was in my early 20s, and were like, this is what you have to do to be safe and healthy. And even if I'm not doing these things, this is what you should be doing. And it changed me in a very, almost at a cellular level, to where I wanted to help.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, like you and a lot of other people were down to do what was needed in the face of all of this government inaction that a lot of groups like ACT UP is probably the most famous one that like sprung up around this. But of course, there were like you mentioned, Tenderloin AIDS Resource Center, TARC, with its like mobile needle exchanges at Civic Center. Like these were the early examples of like what harm reduction could do, which like there's no doubt in my mind that like the work of all these people collectively like absolutely made it so that I think it was like so 20,000 people in San Francisco died during like the early years of the AIDS epidemic, but I think that number would have been higher if not for people coming together like of their own accord. So yeah, it's something that like I feel like is not talked about enough.
Yes, and they and also older gay men sat me down and they were like, "Girl, this is what there was they were like, this is what the things you need to do because no one else is going to do anything for you, especially with me, because I was very careless at various points with sharing syringes. I just didn't understand, because I'm from Ohio. Like I don't have any understanding of what was happening, and I'm using meth, I'm using all these different substances, but it really was formative for me to have people even take 5 minutes of their time to and they would have mutual aid groups, and then at the time they had there was the group that was protesting the mayor of San Francisco by having campouts in front of City
Right.
Hall, like all those kind of things. You couldn't do any of that now.
I know.
You couldn't do any of that now. You would just be arrested. Like I was thinking yesterday about the Rodney King riots when San Francisco was shut down. When we were rioting, there was like, I mean, and that's what it was like. And for days, the National Guard was in San Francisco. Like you couldn't have something like that now. Like even when
Yeah.
we protested the war against Iraq, the National Guard was called in. I mean, now when they have protests in San Francisco, everyone's in jail. People are already in
Yeah.
jail. It doesn't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
build to like
Yeah.
a larger number before they bring in
So
people.
yeah, so much more intense, the militarization. So like for people who don't know, could you explain what the argument against things like needle exchanges are?
So people are saying that you're enabling people
Right.
if you provide them with syringes. And now currently there's a huge backlash nationally against syringes. We are going
Yeah.
backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
People, I think in general, are understanding of naloxone, and some people are understanding of test strips, which it's very, as a side note, it's very difficult to see my life's work, which is the normalization of naloxone, be weaponized against the communities who it's meant to be for. Like it's very difficult because you have these people saying, we want to do only recovery services, and we want to take
Right.
naloxone, and we want to take all the resources, all the money, and take it away from people who use drugs because we know best how this should be distributed. But when really peer-to-peer naloxone has been going, I was working doing the first city sponsored naloxone program was in San Francisco in 2003, and people were even distributing naloxone before. Dan and other people were distributing naloxone
Hmm.
before then. But the argument against harm reduction is that we're stopping people from getting into recovery. But I can tell you, not having a new syringe never stopped. As I said, I had that syringe for a year. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
never has stopped. I mean, I could pull up from Reddit and other things like people making their own syringes, people buying syringes from the Tractor Supply, which are 18 gauges, which is like basically like taking a pen and sticking in your arm. Like people reusing, like if you're going to use drugs, you're going to use drugs. It
Right.
doesn't
Right.
stop. It doesn't stop people.
Yeah.
It only stops. What it stops is, the transmission of disease, and like from people being, doing unhealthy things. So there's very much a groundswell. Like now, some cities are going back to one to one exchange, which
Mm,
um, all the evidence shows that you want to give people as many syringes as you possibly can give
right.
them, and they give them to friends, and then that
Yeah.
prevents diseases from being spread. But
Yeah.
I mean, I remember doing, we would game the one to one exchange. Like we would take the syringes apart, and then we would take the plunger, and we'd have it like this so it looked like two syringes, because we'd have five syringes, and we'd make them look like 10 syringes, so we would have enough syringes, because
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
because things would happen, and you would not have the syringes, you wouldn't keep them all, and so
Right.
you would need them.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's ridiculous. And like that's one of the things, yeah, like Narcan, naloxone is one of the things that in the book, which came out in 2016, like you know that even at that point there was like some of this backsliding happening with some of the like positive harm reduction oriented reforms, including like, I mean, I it does feel like naloxone is more widely available than I've seen it in my lifetime. I have like some that I just carry around when I have my backpack on me, and like everybody, you might as well, especially if you live like central part of San Francisco. I'm in the TL, uh, actually, yeah, right by Civic Center. And is there anywhere? And so like that's one place that you're seeing backsliding as far as progress. Um, maybe yeah. Could you describe like what does this backsliding like look like more generally?
So I mean, I know places that can't even use the word harm reduction anymore.
Wow.
They're
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
been told to take harm reduction out of grants. I mean,
Yeah.
even was it the Trump executive order where they specifically
Yeah.
talked about harm
Yeah.
reduction? Like
Targeting it.
there is an absolute push to the other side, to where um I don't think recovery, because I'm a person in recovery. Like I've been sober 26 years. There's not um a tension between people getting into recovery and people doing harm reduction. But harm reduction should not be strictly so people can get into recovery. It should stand on its own sake. Like it doesn't, they don't have to be entwined with each other. But the society needs to understand that there are harms, and you can potentially mitigate against the harms. And it's weird, because you would think the libertarians, who are very much into like saving money and stuff like that, like there was at one point, I would say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, even sort of like the billionaire libertarians were sort of pushing towards, you should have a safe consumption space,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they didn't want to see people using on the street. And so but then that just fell apart, that whole,
Totally.
they're it's weird how, when you depend on sort of like the billionaire minions, and their ideas about stuff constantly change, or whatever, the Peter Thiels of the world, who also use substances, like um their ideas shift, and so public opinion seems to
Yeah.
shift with them.
Yeah. 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 Totally. I mean, we had like two. I know there was like one in Soma around like 2020, and then there was like a short-lived, safe injection site like in the right at UN Plaza, in Civic Center, that supposedly was like saving maybe like a life a day. This was like early pandemic, like quarantine times when like people were really going through it. So, use was up, and it it was saving a lot of lives. But then like unfortunately we had Matt Dorsey is a local politician who like has made his sort of career off of the fact that like he is an addict, and he, I guess, because of that, like he has that sort of point of view, he has that reputation rather, so other people are meant to like just listen to him as like that addict politician, and like whatever he says goes. And he is not a fan of harm reduction. uh
So I'm not going to speak to any individual, and I'm also not
Totally.
speaking for my employer in any way, shape, or form.
For sure.
I will say that when you talk about the recovery advocate, and I myself have been a recovery advocate, that's a sample size of one. That's one person. When you say this worked for me in a controlled study, that's just one person. Like there's
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
things, there's other factors and other things to look at. And when you talk about, we'll just call it the Heather nidification of what has happened. So, back in the day it was C.W. Nevis, and then it became the Heather nidification of people being built
Yeah.
up as like the authority. And that happens all over the country.
Yeah, like so these are like the Chronicle writers who like were kind of like able to, they decided who was the voice of like the addicts
Yes, and
in the
any
media.
and they will do that with multiple publications. At one point, I was the voice of naloxone. So at one point, I made the public decision to send. Okay, so I was sending naloxone through the mail starting in 2013, 2012, which was illegal
Mm,
as through Reddit as a civil disobedience. I was sending naloxone to 50 states. I've sent it overseas, completely illegal. So I'm sending the naloxone through the mail, and I had the choice: do I put this in the news, let people write stories about it,
mm-hmm.
knowing
Right.
that I might get arrested? But I thought, well, I'm a mother of three with three little kids. I was in this movie, Black Tar Heroin at the Dark End of the Street. I have all this. So we're going back to, is social media addictive? There, if you go back 20 years, I'm the same person. I have not changed. My whole persona has not changed. And for young people who don't, you have so many disappointing stories about public leaders, and you believe in them, and then you find out they're terrible.
Yeah.
Like my whole arc is the same. So I thought, am I going to throw my whole reputation into them coming and filming me and showing me with the naloxone for a period of time? Because while you have the media's attention, you have to like go with it. And so I let these stories be done. And by the time, I did the book, I did NPR's Fresher, I did all these different things. But
Mm-mm.
the turning point was when they came and filmed me for something, and it ended up being on the Today Show. So they were talking about naloxone while people are eating their cereal in the morning. And so up until that point, any media I had done came with about 100 messages that said, let junkies die, uh, fuck you, bitch. Like all these
Yeah,
different
yeah.
messages I would get.
Sure.
But when I did what ended up, because it was like a news story on NBC that ended up being the Today Show, and I let them film my children, and we were talking about naloxone, and they were talking about how many times I'd been arrested, trying to normalize naloxone. But the end point was, I had one negative message, one. But the messages I did get were from mothers, families in all over the United States trying to figure out how to get naloxone.
Hmm.
And then I realized, if you have that attention, you can really change things. So what has happened, because people believe you, right? They see it on TV and they believe it. So what has happened with a lot of recovery influencers, and I'm saying nationwide, is you have one person who gets the interest, or there's a reporter who needs a
Sure.
person,
Totally.
and people believe them. And the point is, now public policy is being drafted around the opinions of a handful of people
Yep.
without input from other. You can have decades of science, but one person says this is a bad thing be,
Right.
because I say so.
They're the voice. They're the voice of the community.
The whole
Yeah.
community, the
Yeah.
whole the
Yeah.
whole community is
Yeah.
wrapped up in one
Ooh.
person. And so I don't do any of that shit anymore. Every once in a while I'll get contacted for interviews. Channel 5 contacted me. Andrew contacted me. Go to somebody else. I don't want to be, because it's time for the next generation of people, first of all, to to have their like policy views highlighted, but also I just don't know how. I get so frustrated dealing with these people. I come out of my role. You know what I mean? I just want to say, shut the fuck up.
The like the media or the responses?
The people, the
Yeah,
recovery
yeah.
influencers.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I get so I
Yes.
and they tried to get me fired. There was all this stuff. There was all this stuff.
Oh,
Um they'll dox you. They, not them in particular, but like their minions will dox
yeah.
you and all this other kind of stuff. It's very challenging in today's environment.
Yeah, I mean, my next question was kind of on that issue of like, what do you make of like the influencers who have been coming up in the last few years, who have been become like really popular, who identify as like ex-users, in a lot of cases, like their content on the Instagram or TikTok, it'll be like, you know taping people going through it, like going through like psychiatric emergency, like using on the streets, and like, you know, never having a good day. They're not catching people on a good day for sure. Why do you think that this has become so popular?
So I was in a documentary called Black Tar Heroin: The Dark End of the Street that came out. It came out in 1999, but it ended. They stopped filming me in December of 1997. I got sober before this movie was released. They didn't put in the movie that I had gotten sober because it's not good TV.
Mm,
It's not good TV. That people like to watch people in addiction. Like that movie came out a zillion years ago. People still contact me at least once a week about that movie. But the point is, that movie, for the subjects in it, it ruined, and I mean
mm,
ruined, some of those people's lives.
mm.
I can tell you that you may think if you film somebody on the street for like 2 seconds, who's ever going to find that person? But you would be surprised. People called my work
Mm.
from that movie. It doesn't say my last name anywhere in that movie. This is before the internet was really popular. Doesn't say my name anywhere in that movie. People called my work. People called my mother. My mother, who has
Wow.
nothing to
Yeah,
do with that,
yeah,
in
yeah,
Ohio, in rural Ohio, called my mother. So you're filming people at the lowest points in their lives out on the street because it people like to, they I wouldn't say they like to, but it's like, why do people watch crime dramas? It stimulates some part of your brain. You know what I mean?
for sure.
It
Yeah,
makes people it it gives you like it's almost like it gives you a reaction sort to way like making hate comments and hate content do. Like it elicits a reaction from people. But you also could elicit a reaction from people with positive things, they monetize outrage. They monetize outrage. Like my own family in Ohio has contacted me numerous times and asked me about the hellscape that is in San Francisco,
for sure.
about this vast this vast hellscape, and am I afraid to go out on the streets
Yep.
and all this other
Yep.
kind of stuff. It's like I was on the streets in the 90s living outside. Like it was worse then. People got murdered.
Yeah.
Like I was across the street eating on Haight Street. There was a double murder across the street.
My
Like
boyfriend
you
will get, yeah, a text from his dad, who's like a strictly Fox News watcher, like has it on 24/7, whether or not he's in the room, it's always on. And yeah, though it's funny how like San Francisco still has this reputation as, I mean, the doom loop stuff didn't help, but like the reputation, it's still it's so wild.
It's weird how they built up the doom loop and didn't think there'd be any kind of repercussions for that.
Yeah,
They oh, we have this terrible thing, and then they're like, oh wait, but businesses don't want to come here, people don't want to come here. It's like, but you made it sound like this was, that it was beyond Thunderdome downtown or whatever. It's like the Tenderloin has some of the best places to eat in the city and most affordable. Like I lived in the TL for 10 years, and there, but if you go to, I just was in, what you don't hear about is like, I was in Dallas, Texas. There's homeless people outside. It's 105 degrees. There's homeless people If you go to the Central Valley, how many people have heard about when you go to Fresno, Stockton, every place you go, there are encampments of homeless people. There's
Yep.
homeless people in the United States. So I don't know, I can't come up with like, I could pull up the exact numbers, but like when they did the last point in time count, they said there was like 770,000 homeless people in the United States. But it's probably closer because they don't count people who are staying in the hotels overnight. They don't count people couch surfing. So if you think it's a million people, let's just say a million people are unhoused at some point, that's one in every 300 something people in the United States. Like
Wow.
homelessness is the norm. It's not the outlier. It's like that is something that is going on, but they have singled out these cities as like the worst place to be or whatever when it's going on in their own backyard.
For
It's
sure.
right there. I mean,
For sure.
take the train from the Amtrak and you see the people all, or even if you take the Caltrain, you see all down the peninsula people sleeping by the train tracks. There's people homeless everywhere.
Yep.
It's just in a lot of these places, in the South, in the rural South, they arrest them before you don't see them, but like they are out of view. Like that's but when that was one of the things I went and did outreach in Dallas, Texas. It's like it's 105 degrees out, and there's homeless people sleeping under the underpass just so they can get some shade.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just getting worse. Yeah, I mean, and of course, like, yeah, the cost is not going down. The cost of
Yes,
all like rents. I mean, I know, some of it has to do with like the technology wherein like landlords are able to like set prices, collude that, and kind of keep edging those prices up ever so slightly. And more, like property is owned by fewer and fewer
yes,
people. So it's like, yeah,
yes. You have
something
private
needs to
equity
happen.
buying up homes and apartment
Yeah,
buildings, and then on top of that, the minimum wage hasn't gone up in
right.
a lot of places. Like I traveled quite a bit in when my book came out, just like not some of it on my own dime. I would just go places to talk about harm reduction and naloxone and stuff like that. And I would always ask the outreach workers, take me out to where the people are. Not because, I just want to see. I want to see with my own eyes so I can report back. And you see there's homeless people everywhere. It's not
Yep.
just here. It's
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
But you never see like story about homeless people in Stockton, California, homeless encampments. I've taken my son to like a baseball tournaments all over the Central Valley. There's homeless people everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is funny. I mean, yeah, San Francisco for some reason just continues to be like held up as like an example of like a uniquely like horrible, yeah, like terror dome that, is this 7 by
That
7 mile
we're the
square.
failure of progressive policies, but we've never had a
Right.
really progressive mayor.
Totally, totally,
Like I
totally.
campaigned for
Yes.
Matt Gonzalez, like that. That was like
That was the closest, yeah, we came.
the closest we came. And so when people talk about I'm like the progressives have never ran San Francisco.
Yeah. Yep. I must agree. I must concur. So this is like kind of, I don't know, this question. Um, but okay. Prohibition, 1920s flopped. We have the president, we have the world's richest person, our drug users, according to the people working for them. The US is the top consumer of.
According to Elon Musk's own accounts, he
Yeah, yeah,
uses
yeah, yeah,
ketamine.
that's true. Yeah, I mean,
He
he's
has
yeah,
said that he
yeah,
uses he has
yeah,
said that he
yeah,
uses ketamine.
yeah. Why are drugs still illegal in 2025?
I thought I'm not the Drug Policy Alliance is really the best for kind of explaining these big issues. I think the war on drugs is actually a war on people. It's a
Yeah.
people in the United States love drugs. Let's just be honest about it. People
Hmm.
in the United States love drugs, whether it's alcohol, which still one of the drugs that kills the most people
Yep.
globally, alcohol, or whether it's their pharmaceutical drugs. There's almost it's weird that like even the terms hard drugs and soft drugs, like there's you know people will go out and take G and ketamine, but look down on people who use fentanyl on the street or whatever. Like they don't even see them. But it's like the harms of criminalization. Like to think about going through watching my friends die from AIDS, and now I've known I've so many people die from fentanyl because of the the criminalization, and you push people farther and farther into unsafe markets where they're who knows what's in the shit anymore. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
fentanyl, I've used it before. It's not even a good drug. It's not even like there's no euphoria. It's not like a good drug. So why when because I mean our country was founded by a bunch of Puritans who don't want people to have fun. I think is a lot of I mean they don't want
Yeah,
people to
no, I
have
think that's part of it. Yeah.
I really think that's part of it. And then you have, the evangelical Christians who've taken, the Christians who've taken over sort of the public policy space, dictating what different things are. But in terms of like prohibition in the 1920s was a huge failure. I mean, there have been like various opportunities, but it's a way of when you criminalize certain drugs, you control the population in so many ways. Like, still, when I think about my felony is for less than a tenth of gram of drugs in San Francisco,
Hmm.
and people are always like, "Oh, why don't you go and get your case taken away?" But when I was in the jail, that's when I really learned about you know there's people in the jail who can't read the failures of the school. It's almost when I was in the jail it was like 80% African American, um, Latinas, and then indigenous. Like that's all the different systems fail people, and then they end up in the jail, and that's like the final way of them not dealing with the people. Like
Yep.
there's so so many different ways that our systems fail people, and drug policy is another way of sort of like throwing away the key on people.
Yeah, I mean, things like I mean, conservatorship and just taking away people's, like, total self-determination and then, like, leaving it up to a stranger is having, like, a little bit of a resurgence, unfortunately.
That's
Um
a big I mean, forced treatment is a whole movement now. I mean, I will say, there is a very small percentage of the population that can benefit from, I wouldn't call it forced treatment, but having an intervention around treatment.
Mm, mm,
But it always should be voluntary first. You should always, if you had, we do not have enough beds for people who want to go into treatment. So then
right.
there wants to be this effort to push a bunch of other people into treatment. There has to be you have to have things that people want. You have to like even now the treatment is too short. Like when I was going to treatment stays were 6 months long, and you could get a job when you lived in there. So when you left, you had a better chance of like having a leg up on society. But now, I mean, in the field, I'm not in that field, but when I was, they would call them spin dries. What can you do in 28 days?
Right. I know, yeah, in the book you describe, like, you, like, hit the jackpot with a 90-day program, and, it's very unusual.
And then I moved into the Salvation Army program.
Yeah?
And then the Salvation Army had a shelter there, and they closed the shelter rather than offer domestic partner benefits
Ah,
at the
that's
ground
funny,
floor.
that's wild, that's wild.
So the
Yeah,
Salvation Army Bridgeway, you can look it up. It's
that's
still,
how much they loathe, yeah, gay people, wow.
I mean, the thing about the advantage that the Salvation Army has on a lot of places that isn't talked about enough is they buy the properties. They don't usually
Mm,
rent properties. They buy the properties so they can have these longer programs for people that make them more enticing. So the building that's there at 242 Turk Street, I lived in the old version of the building. The Kroc heiress, when she died, she gave the Salvation Army $1 billion. Not million, bill. She gave the $1 billion. They built that building. I think it was like 140 something million. Like they buy up all these properties so they can have these services. It's different than like, you and me and somebody else decide we're going to put together a mutual aid treatment facility. We're going to be struggling to keep the
for
lights on
sure.
all the
Yep,
time. And we're not going to, and if we want to serve more people, we have to cut the stay shorter. So it's like what that is their unique position in rehabs, is that they have the properties to have these longer stays, which are beneficial to some people, but you have to know who you're getting into bed with when you're getting into bed with them, because they are a Christian-led organization, no matter how much they try to, not bring that part up.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like, is there anything that we could leave people on with like a little bit of a positive note about harm reduction in San Francisco? I mean, I do want to just stress how like I just appreciate being in a city where a lot of the like forms of harm reduction that are all over the world today, like they started here in San Francisco. Like there are a lot of people that are still really dedicated to
There's
um
amazing people here. There's
yeah,
amazing people here. The average person here wants to help. I mean,
yeah,
the average person
agree.
carries
Yeah.
naloxone, goes out to Oasis on a Friday night, leaves hearing about naloxone, um, will call, about their neighbors. It's the average person cares about they do care about harm reduction.
Yeah.
Everybody has had a friend. I mean, in 2025, if you're under the age of 40, there's very few people who haven't had a friend who hasn't died of a fentanyl overdose, whether it was in the coke, and there was cross contamination, or there's just not that many people. So you have people who are very who are very caring, and so there's a groundswell of like empathy, but those aren't the loudest voices in the room. You know,
Sure.
those people aren't necessarily the people you hear from the most. There's a lot of like well-funded ops,
Yep.
that
Yep.
are very, because most people at work, they don't have time to be chronically online. They don't have
Yeah.
time to like, they just don't have time for that. So as I said, I'm not speaking for my employer or anyone else. I'm just speaking for my own as a person who has spent time in my life chronically online. That's like a whole, if you can't even get into the discussions with people. You have to just go out and do the work. Really, you just have to. And there's a lot of like really great people in the Bay Area who are doing the work, who are organizing mutual aid projects, who are just going out and finding ways that they can contribute. I mean, I mean, like you had the interview with the people from Food Not Bombs. Like they've been here. I ate at Food Not Bombs 30 years ago, at
Hmm.
Civic Center Park. There's a history here of people mobilizing for different projects, and the things that are going on with the immigration projects, people showing up for immigration court. Like there's a history of that, of people wanting to get involved. It's an amazing place for that.
Yeah. No, in a way, I'm like, the Fox News stories, like our reaction to that idea. Yeah, I mean, that community that does exist. uh Thank you so much for
I
coming
probably talked too much.
through. No. I'm stoked to have like actually gotten to talk in like, well, over virtually, but like wanted to ask before I let you go if there's anything that you're working on that you might want to plug. And you mentioned like YouTube is like a place that people could find you too.
So I still send harm reduction supplies. If people have questions about that, if people have questions that I can try to answer, I DM with people, whatever your potential questions are. Like that's something that for a while I had to take some time for myself, but I feel like I'm fairly well energized again. It but the struggle is long. It's a long road, and you have to like replenish yourself and then sort of like get back into different things. And so um but I definitely have. I have a phone full of cat pictures whenever I get too stressed out or whatever. Like I hope that people who are listening to your podcast are really in today's world taking care of themselves and taking care of not just lip service, like finding little things in your life that bring you joy, whatever that may be, whether it's knitting or cats or going out and looking at graffiti or
Yeah.
going to the beach. We live right by the beach, trying to see if you can see dolphins, whatever it is that just makes you happy, because all that shit is free.
Yeah, no, and we need to, like you said, it's like a long struggle, so we need to sustain it, and like we need the people who are on our side to stay alive.
Yes, very much so.
uh Thank you
Okay.
again. And yeah, I'll see you online or like maybe in the TL.
Okay, bye.
All right. Thank you for listening to the show, and especially thank you to everyone who is contributing over at patreon.com/SadFrancisco. You're making it possible for Sad Francisco to exist. And if you're not already a member, think about joining. Again, it's patreon.com/SadFrancisco.